Welcome back, everyone. On today's episode, Michelle and I are happy to be speaking with the product leader coach and author of the book, What Do Product Managers Do? Welcome to the show, Tami Reiss. Let's hop in.
Hi, so glad to be here. You're my first podcast dedicated just to the book. I'm pumped.
Awesome. It's great to have you. Really excited to talk about it today. Hey, Michelle.
Hey Nat, hey Tammy, welcome to the podcast all the way from Florida.
Tammy from Miami.
Yeah, plus one for Americans. I'm not going there anymore. That's it. Uh,
I'm
so
sorry.
no, it's okay. It's okay.
Nah,
No, it's an inside joke that listeners, our constant listeners, might understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, fair.
But I love Miami actually. I've been there many times before. Welcome to the show. So you wrote this book, and soon we will talk about the book. Who is it for? Is it a children book or is it for someone else? But first, tell us about yourself. Who
Ah,
is Tammy?
who is Tammy? Tammy is so many things. Tammy is a product leader who became a product leader coach, executive coach, who now specializes in training teams of all kinds about influence. And I also do keynote speaking. And if you had to put a wrapper around everything, I help people master influence so they can maximize impact. And a lot of that comes from the product management influence without authority stuff and what we have to do as product folk and how I believe everyone should learn to do that.
Yeah, and how did you get to that? Like, what was your way into product management?
it's one of our favorite questions because we all have very diverse
Yeah,
backgrounds.
no, I often say something like if you tried to guess what my degree in college was or my first job, everybody's always wrong.
Mhm.
Because my degree in college is in physiological science, how the body works, and I was supposed to be a physical therapist, and I was an athletic trainer at UCLA undergrad.
Mhm.
But that makes me a systems thinker, and why I tended to be great at
Yes,
API land and microservices for product management.
that's the key. We all come from diverse backgrounds, but those backgrounds really serve us well in our
Yeah,
careers.
Yes.
that's really interesting how you kind of learn from that background into how products work or how companies that build products work.
Yes. And then but that also helps with organizational design now in
Yep.
my second is my second act. And then my first job was as a fundraiser event planner.
Hmm.
And if you want to be part of a product launch with a really strict date, it's when there's 300 people showing up in a ballroom.
The pressure's
Absolutely.
on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, yeah. So I actually used to be a project manager,
Hmm. Oh no.
There's that word. There's
but like I was the fundraiser who analyzed which zip code was best. And I was A/B testing call scripts at,
Oh wow.
but I didn't know it was called A/B testing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just a scientist by my nature, and I didn't
Mm,
ever take anything for what it was.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think almost every product manager we're talking with had some diverse background and they were doing product management without even knowing that that's what they were
exactly. You
I
were
have
doing go
one
to
friend who
market.
that isn't the case. I know one person.
doing. Hmm.
He literally did industrial engineering at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. He got recruited by Microsoft and started there as a program manager. Like his first job was at Microsoft at what they called program management at the time. He's
Hmm.
been a product manager for 20 some odd years, but
Wow.
literally has never done anything else. And I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. Like
That is
that's actually
fascinating.
more
There's
fascinating
always
to
an
me
outlier.
than
There's always an
anyone who has a
outlier.
different job at this point.
But this is actually a really interesting segue into the topic of our episode today, the book that you wrote, because the book is for aspiring product managers of a certain age,
Of all ages, of
of
all
all
ages.
ages, of all ages. True, true, true. It is written as a kid's book, and I think on the cover or in the first pages you're saying like who is it for and stuff like that. But it's really for people that want to be, or at least want to understand what product management is all about, right?
Yeah. So the title of the book is What Do Product Managers Do? which is simplistic enough, understand what it is we do. Because I can't tell you how often someone has said to me, what exactly is it that product managers do? Or even that friend I just referred to, his girlfriend, I don't know, a decade ago, who's no longer his girlfriend, asked me, like, hey, he can't ever explain to me what he does for work. Can you explain it to me? And that was where, like, literally walking through the East Village of New York was where I came up with product managers are the people who decide what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been saying that for a decade now. But it occurred to me, like, how often the people who we're closest with have no idea what it is we do, including our parents, including our spouses, and especially our kids. Because my daughter recently, when they were having other kids' parents come in for career day in her kindergarten, said, Mommy, what does daddy do? And my husband happens to be an investor, and that's really complicated to explain to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But I said, why aren't you asking me what I do? Is it because of the book? And she said, no, Mommy, I know what you do. You have meetings, you take calls.
Yes. 100%. That's a lot. A
100%.
lot of.
That is exactly what I do. And I wanted to share with her and the world what product management was. And a few years back, group of 3 or 4 product experienced folk and I got together and we wrote 4 blog articles that were geared towards people who wanted to become product managers, because we were all sick of spending half an hour with people who wanted to break into product management, explaining it, teaching them the lingo, teaching them how to spin their previous experience to make it more attractive to a product role. And so we wrote this set of articles, and it's awesome and I share it consistently, but I wanted something that was more fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, as I really think about it, it's for product managers. It is a book for us that
Mm-hmm.
makes us laugh, that
Mm-hmm.
makes us giggle, that goes, yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And at the same point, the subtitle of the book is for aspiring PMs of all ages, meaning it's for your 4-year-old, it's for the 27-year-old, it's for the 40-year-old who's thinking of transitioning into product management, and parents who aren't sure it's a real job. I
Mm-hmm.
forget what that used to be. Like, it used to be like parents who don't believe you can pay rent doing that or something. Parents who aren't sure it's a real job was definitely the better option. But that second half, a lot of people were like, you don't need that. Like, don't put that in. Like, that's too kitschy. But it
Mm-hmm.
is the number one thing people laugh at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, no, that's
it
true.
opens up this moment of, I'm gonna enjoy this. This is not gonna be purely educational. I'm gonna laugh. I'm gonna smile.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, so will the other person who I'm reading this to, which might just be my child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What-
You know what? At the end of the day, many of the things we do, at least I can talk personally, I do it for my kids. I want them to see things are possible, things are, you can achieve things that you're dreaming about. Took me 8 years to publish my book, but that was my goal. I didn't care about who's going to read it. I just want my kids to see it's possible. So it's
100%.
really, it's
I
really
definitely
matter.
have a bigger goal here.
Yes, but you must admit that you do it a lot of it for your kids, and you dedicated the
Oh,
book
yeah.
to your kids, right? So that's really cool.
There was a long period of time, I'm talking like a year and a half, where I thought we weren't actually going to publish it as a book, that it was just going to be a YouTube video of me reading it
Hmm.
to my kid, and then it could become this video that you could share. Because in
Hmm.
reality, especially in that case of someone's talking to you about becoming a product manager, you could do that. And
Yeah.
kids really early on are watching YouTube videos. And I was convinced that's all it was ever going to be. And then I published that video, and the response I got said I should turn this into an actual printed book.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think an important note is if you can explain this role to a child and they can understand it, I think that's like where you're explaining the role correctly, or you're giving enough context to what you're actually doing. Because I've had the same question from my child. What do you do, Dad? I know you're on calls all day long. And then when you start to explain it, well, I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They get lost with it. But I love the way you went through the book and like really hit on the key framework of what product management is. we can go into any product management role, and all companies do things differently, and you could wind up in a very different situation. But if you stay true to the way you've outlined it, I think it's like a really good approach.
Thanks. And one of the challenges actually was that the title is What Do Product Managers Do? But because we collaborate with so many other people to get what we need done,
Yeah.
I had to have mini stanzas about engineers and designers and marketers
Yep.
and salespeople because they're all part of how this happens. Because I
Right.
wanted people to have appreciation for everything we use. Everything we use is pretty much a product.
Right.
And so from the chair or the table or your iPhone or the can of soda, like someone is being thoughtful and intentional about what's going into that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's typically how I
And
have to explain it to somebody. Yeah.
and it's not just one person, right?
Mhm.
It's the engineer who built it and how did they collaborate with the product manager? And it's the designer who worked through user flows. And it's because I work in B2B software, it's the salesperson, it's the marketer, and I use, stakeholders at some point, talking
Right.
about what stakeholders want, because that's a big part of what it is that product managers do because we're so interactive.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And the book has lovely pictures that also are fun and demonstrate those ideas in additional way. I'm always looking into, especially here, I was looking into, okay, so how do you describe the engineers? And you see those people lifting things and the code behind the things and things like that. So I really enjoy that. Who is the illustrator of the book?
So the illustrator is a person named V Lubow who lives in Berlin. They are the partner of a friend of mine who's like a CPO, CTO. And that was also a product management experience, right? Because this book is product manager.
Mhm.
It's a product that's being
Yep.
put out into the world. And at some point, they and I were working through a lot of the imagery of the original What Did Sue Look Like? And to be clear, Sue's original name was Drew because I wanted Drew to be an androgynous person.
Mm,
And when we got some feedback, too many people thought Drew was actually a male name, even though I thought of Drew Barrymore, but that didn't it doesn't resonate with enough people. And we decided to make Sue female, but she has more of an androgynous feel to the way she
mm,
looks. My friend Eric, who is V's partner, said to me, Tami, this is like any other product with a designer. Do not be overly prescriptive. Let them go through their process. Let
mm.
them ask you the questions. And they are fantastic at this. Let them take it. And the second I stepped back from being more prescriptive, it became magical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they did such a fantastic job of expanding on it and really understanding product and really understanding the ethos of this book to be playful. And I send them messages all the time about how many people are in love with the imagery of this
Yeah.
book and how it a million times elevated the book
Mhm.
because the words on the page are so much incomplete without the pictures.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm a visual learner, and just, reading the words, but then looking at the pictures are like really helpful.
Yeah.
I want it to be like a Netflix show or something like that.
Well, there is an updated YouTube video coming out with all of the new
Perfect.
pages that
Yeah.
we had to include when we decided to go to print because it's a 32-page book
Mhm.
that when we did it in PowerPoint for the original YouTube, I think had like 8 pages.
Mm. But something you said is really, really, really cool and caught my attention there that even us as product managers, we sometimes don't think about other things outside of our work as products. You might think about it as product, but you didn't apply your full processes over there, saying, okay, the illustrator is a designer, let them do the work like you do at work. And then you realize that and you saw the magic happening. And it's so true that everything that we do in life, I think, is a product.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
for us, it might be more obvious to see, but even we are sometimes getting caught into this trap
Well,
Especially because this is also art, it's your
yeah.
baby. You want it to be perfect.
So something that like kills me is, as I mentioned, I give talks and trainings about leadership and influence. And I cannot tell you how often I forget my own principles, right? That I forget that it's important to ask questions instead of make statements. And it's like in the parent chat of my preschool that I forget it, right? Or
Yeah.
when I'm talking to my parent or my husband or my child. And in reality, if I better internalized everything I talk about for the business world to my personal life and
Hmm.
everyone else did, we would be better off.
Yeah. It's very hard when we are in the trenches and we don't think about it. We separate it. We have this separation and stuff like that. To me, this actually, I had this lesson as well because I try to treat my book as as a product as well. But then I had to pre-sell it. So I did a month of pre-selling, and that was one of the hardest months that I endured back then in my life. And the lesson I learned from that was how hard it is to do sales and how my empathy to the salespeople and those stakeholders grew so much just by doing it.
Yes.
So
Hmm. Yep.
there is a lot of lessons learning from us doing these things, even if it's not the typical product that we're thinking about.
Yeah. And one of the things that I do a lot of as a product person is A/B testing, right? Or getting user testing. And the book existed without any imagery for a very long time. It was just a text Word doc,
Hmm.
Google Doc. And at some point, I started sharing it with some of my clients and my friends, and they would comment on it. And at some point, I said, you know what? Let's democratize this. Let's allow for other product people to tell me what rhyme they don't like, to tell me what I've missed here, what stanzas are irrelevant. And that was a huge learning lesson because
Hmm.
not only did I get critique on content, I also got an email from a friend of mine who turned out was a poetry major in college. Note he is a CFO, but he was a poetry major in college. And he
That
said,
counts.
Tammy, your rhyme and meter are off.
Oh, that's that's very insightful.
uh,
And I I was under the impression that as long as the ends of the two lines rhymed, it was fine. And I
right.
learned otherwise. And I turned to a friend of mine who's very good at rhyme and meter and rhythm and writes songs that are parodies, right? So she has this comedic edge and she went through it for rhyme and meter. And I paid her to do that because
Yeah.
that's not a skill set I have.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
the
That's
same way
cool.
I turn to a designer, I turn to a person who does better at copy.
Yeah.
And the inside words have been through so many changes that it's amazing to me that it's still true to its original thing. But even when I put out that YouTube video, I got a message from Dan Olson, who's going to be hosting the book launch. And he said, Tammy, people don't call it grooming backlogs anymore. And I said, oh,
Mhm.
like I've been so out of being a practitioner, like only in leadership for years. And he said, yeah, we call it refining now.
Yeah.
And I said, that totally makes sense.
Hmm.
So let me change it. So in the printed copy, it says refining backlogs. And we had to adjust the rhyme a little bit because grooming is 2 syllables and refining is 3. But
Yeah.
that feedback to make sure I'm more cognizant of what the present terminology is,
Hmm.
but B, that I don't potentially offend somebody.
Right. And
Yeah,
who
that's
knows?
cool.
You might need to create new editions in the future when things change.
Yes, this is the first edition that's coming out. The second edition is coming out in September for the Product Development Management Association meeting in Chicago at
Mm.
their big summit. And that will have slightly better imagery in different ways, a different cover in some ways. There's just a new publisher who I met after I had already submitted it for self-publishing, and they said it's a company called Amplify Publishing who actually their specialty is in business books and like
Mm.
books for speakers and stuff. And
Mhm.
they have a second imprint called Mascot, which is children's books
Ah,
generally geared towards social emotional learning and things of that sort. And they said, we want to publish this book. And I
amazing.
said, cool. And then they said, but we're not sure if it should be under Amplify or Mascot because it's really a business book.
We can do both.
Yeah.
We agreed on mascot, but yeah, I'm excited about that. It's just like a new partnership. Validation that there's something special here that hasn't really been done before. We joke that once it actually is listed on Amazon, I'm going to become an Amazon bestseller because business books for kids, there isn't much competition in.
There you go.
Good for you. Good for
You
you.
found a
The
space.
actual category we'll be in is it's about careers and jobs and stuff. But again, I don't think there's been a new book published there since 2016.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing, and you mentioned a few words there, and I think that this is really interesting to dive into because our world is full with this lingo and words that we understand and word
Buzzwords. We call them buzzwords in the
buzzwords.
book.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. And the buzzes are all around the book as well. And but it's more than that because to us they're really important and we don't use them as buzzwords. We use them as this is our life and you should understand what they mean, to understand us.
Any sophisticated word, any sophisticated
Right.
use of vocabulary carries a lot more weight.
Right.
And the reason why we use the terminology is because it's shorthand for everything else it means.
Yeah.
When we say lean, it has a meaning of customer development and user interviews and doing what's right for the customer and adding
Right.
customer value and iteration.
Yeah.
When we say agile, we mean we're breaking it into smaller parts and we might change our plan along the way.
Yeah.
But we're only using one word.
And the book is doing a great
Launch.
job in diving into those and explaining those. But even when you explain those, we are still using those words that we know what they are. So empathy, we mentioned before. And things like that that may just mean don't mean much to the reader. And we were joking before when we were getting ready for, we're not really joking, it was half joked when we were getting ready for the episode that a lot of those words are actually need to be explained to our bosses, to our colleagues, to our stakeholders. So, and I said maybe everyone needs to highlight some of those words on the book when they go to the job and give it to their manager. And actually, each one of us were thinking about different words. But that's, I think, it just show the complexity of explaining those things. So what do you think about that? I mean, maybe there is a space here for some sequels, going more into what does empathy looks like and what does it mean and what, you know what I mean? Because I think that,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
I hope not to write another children's book because it's been 5 years in the making. And it turns out it's much more complicated to get to small amounts of words than it is big amounts of words. I think we're
Right.
all aware of that.
Right.
But something you're mentioning that happened in that feedback when it was just a Google Doc was someone said, I think you need a glossary. Even though you're providing context clues here, you should also have a glossary of some of these terms. And so that's something that's at the end of the book. And when I recorded the videos of us reading the book, there's actually a separate video just for glossary. So if you just want to provide the glossary terms to someone so they can learn them, whether they're trying to become a product manager or otherwise, that is the 1.5 minute version. But we talked about like, what's the vision of any sort of product. And in this case, my vision for this book is that if my dreams come true, it becomes canonical. That you recommend this in the same way you recommend Inspired or Escaping the Build Trap or the Lean Product Playbook, that even though it is humorous, even though it is illustrated, the depth of what you receive from the book is equivalent to that. So when you have a startup founder who doesn't have a product manager and you're teaching them about what product managers do, you send them the YouTube video on this. When you have a corporation that's going through a transformation towards a product operating mindset, you give them all a copy of this book or the video because that's free. I don't care about making royalties on the book. Anybody who's ever published a book will tell you it's not how we become millionaires.
Mhm.
Like that's why we're creating the YouTube video, because we want it to be democratized. We want it to be accessible. We don't want there to be any barriers for entry, because it's so important to be able to give to people who are now transitioning into more of a product mindset, more of a product operating model. And it's a way that it doesn't seem like, oh, we're changing our whole processes, blah, 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 just another change. It can be exciting, it can be fun, it can be funny. And that's like the pipe dream here.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, with AI controlling the world, and it's coming up in every episode that we're talking about.
V Lubow is actually an AI. All of the illustrations were done by ChatGPT. No, absolutely not. They are
That
fantastic.
was
Yes, keep
not
going.
my question.
No, no,
That
no.
was
Keep
not my
going. Keep going.
question.
It was just
Because
making me
no
curious.
AI would be able to make what you made. No
No,
AI could do
definitely
that.
not.
So there is a lot of creativity there, and there is no way. My question would be actually about maybe the sequel or maybe the next step that you said you don't want to do. But the discussions I had in the last month or two, several discussions with multiple people about which jobs AI is going to replace. And the main discussion was developers versus product managers. And the developer said that it will replace product managers, and the product managers said it probably will replace developers first. So, who's going to be under the chopping
The
block
race.
first, right?
So I don't believe anybody's going to be under the chopping block in terms of a general profession. What I
Mhm.
do believe is that people who aren't masters of their profession are going to become less employable, because those who are masters will be able to do more when they leverage AI. So, product managers, whether it's chat PRD or writing user stories or any of the items that we do that are a little bit more rote and much more repeatable, gaining user input for things, etc., that is going to become a lot faster and augmented by AI. Product
Mhm.
managers are going to be able to synthesize data faster, etc., to make the choices we make about what should fit into a company's vision. The
Mhm.
collaboration we do, the explanation we do with designers, developers, salespeople, that's not going away. But if you're the kind of product manager who simply takes information from somebody else and turns it into a user story, that job is going away.
Do
For
you?
developers, I used to work with an engineering manager who I loved to death. And at some point, she turned to me and she was like, Tammy, none of the stuff we're building is really hard. She said, I have a master's in electrical engineering. I wrote my thesis on the way keys are shared that enables cell phone communication. She said, that's complicated. Like coding in React, coding in Ruby on Rails, not that complicated. And so I think that your basic code monkey engineer, they may get replaced by Copilot, by someone who is a master at craftful, artful code, right? Kim Johnson is a friend of mine. She's a former engineering manager, former product manager turned career coach for tech people. And she laughs when she sees the code that gets produced by AI. Yes, it will get you where you need to go for a prototype. Is it
Mhm.
scalable? No. Is it elegant? No. And
Mhm.
so if you're not somebody who understands elegant code and refactoring and classes, the co-pilots aren't going to get you very far, right? But if you are, they can super accelerate your ability to develop a lot more depth of code and identify issues faster,
Yeah.
right? Rather than looking through each line, you have an AI that's helping you find the bug,
Mhm.
etc. So I think that this is what actually kills me, because there are enough masters out there in any of the realms, whether it's design or otherwise. Like, I don't think designers are going to have to prototype as often or
Mhm.
wireframe as often, because there are going to be tools that do that much more simply.
Yeah.
But when it comes to really designing an elegant flow that delights users, you're still going to need a human for that. But the ones that are really good at that are going to be able to leverage the prototyping AI tools to do that faster, or tell their product people to do it, or tell their developers to do it. The thing that I think is really going to change is that we're not going to have an excuse not to do those things, that there won't be enough time to do those things or to get validation, because it's so much more time efficient than it ever has been before.
Yeah.
Synthesizing the data has been easier than it ever has before. And you still need to be smart enough to realize when the AI has synthesized something incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
I liked how you said we will not have excuses not to do experimentation and validation. So
I mean, the developers aren't going to have excuses for not being willing to code A/B tests or
Mhm.
A, B, C, D, E versions out there, because it's so much easier to do it.
Yeah. Now, let me give you a challenge to say everything you just said about my last question in a stanza if you would have to put it in the book.
I would just read the book.
You're right.
I can tell you that I think I'm not alone in this when it comes to the way product managers work. Very often we spend all day in meetings and information overload, and we don't actually have our moments of brilliance or genius until we're lying down in bed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, I think that's a universal thing.
Absolutely.
And I cannot tell you how often a stanza would come to me as I was like lying down in bed, or I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'd be like, oh,
that's it.
Like,
that's it.
Vocation is collaboration. Like, still don't quite get it. Here's my elaboration, right? Like, of course.
Going back to the point on the AI piece, from a product manager standpoint, I see product managers, with the assistance of AI, working more on the business side of things, working more with sales and marketing, go-to-market approaches, because as you mentioned, AI is going to really help with documentation and creating those user stories and PRDs and such, as we discovered on this podcast. So I see the product manager role having more time for strategy and for business, finance, understanding P&L and stuff. And then for the engineering side, that's going to give them time to be more solutions and possibly transition more to product if they're comfortable talking to customers and users.
I've always worked on teams that was the case.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I worked at Pivotal Labs where we all collaborate and engineers are in there with user interviews, and we did that stuff. And like, my favorite moment in my year and a half at Pivotal Labs was when Joe Mazzolotti, who was an engineering manager on a team I was working on, turned to me during a sprint, sizing, whatever meeting. Joe raised his hand and said, Tami, I don't understand how this particular feature produces user value.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so rare for engineers to have that moment.
Yes.
And I encourage, I worked at Pivotal in 2013. Like, I spent over a decade telling that story and the importance of empowering engineers to ask that question. And they cannot ask that question unless they understand the user, unless they understand the customer.
Yep.
And still, a decade later, there aren't enough companies where engineers are actually involved in user research.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly. And I find involving engineering in the value proposition, in the customer experience, in like, how does the code actually impact the business and the customer? I find they're open to that and they want to learn that stuff, holistically, but but you kind of got to pry it. You really have to dive in as a PM and like pull them into that space.
Yeah.
And that will still be the role of product, collaborating with engineering and partnering with engineering so that they can have a safe space to ask the questions about business.
Yep.
So that we can have a safe space to ask about what's technically feasible.
Yep.
And it's still a partnership. But that sort of partnership isn't for people who are 1 year into this role. And that's what scares me, is that in order for there to become masters, you need entry-level people who will over time develop into masters. And if we make it that AI is the entry-level person, where is the funnel of people that will later become masters? And that's what I'm most afraid of. And I'm afraid of this for the legal profession. I'm afraid of this for the consulting profession. I'm afraid of this for the accounting profession. Like, this is, to me, the biggest threat that AI has, is that we're no longer going to have a pipeline of junior people.
Yes.
And like, how do you get them to this higher level if that's what I think the biggest struggle is going to be, is figuring that out. And what are we going to do for entry-level people so they can actually have a job?
That's a really, really great point. And I'm thinking about coming back to the book as well, like, as you mentioned aspiring PMs and teaching people about the role of PM. You're not going to just hand it off to an AI to be like, here, AI, this is what you are. This is what you are now. I think it's really, really going to be interesting to see how the role matures. PMs are still going to have to be critical thinkers. They're going to have to make those decisions based on context that AI would not know unless you prompted it. You had some massive prompt or something like where you train the model on it. So I still think aspiring PMs, 1 year into the role, is still going to have a place, but you're going to have to know the business. That's where I'm coming back to, like, you have to know the business.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
any product manager will tell you that there have been times where if you followed the data, the answer was wrong. Because either we didn't have a complete data set, we didn't have the right data, we were weighting things incorrectly. So much of being a product person is having the humility to say, I'm going to try this, but I might be wrong. Like AI brings this sense of I'm definitely right to it when it definitely isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But we need the human product managers who have been through the trenches and made mistakes to have that humility and say, we're going to try this. We might be wrong. We might even
Right.
be probably wrong, but we're
Yeah.
going to try it anyways and we're going to learn from it. And we're
Right.
going to hopefully learn quickly. And I hope that AI helps us learn faster.
There's a line from the book that I like a lot. Treat us with kindness and do understand. Not everything happens as originally planned.
That's about road mapping,
I would
right?
just look
Yeah.
at I would just look at that because I don't know why I think that we have this tendency to be I don't know, I've been bullied in the past at my job a few times as my job as a product manager. And maybe that is like we have too many punches that we got.
Yeah. I mean, if something goes well, it's the sales team. If something goes bad, it's our fault.
Mhm.
Even if it was an engineer who miscoded something, because it was our fault for letting it go through.
But it's also like that treatment from our environment shouldn't really be acceptable. You're telling kids don't be a bully at school. We teach them all the time, but bullying at work is maybe more under the surface. Maybe they don't feel it's bullying, but it is bullying.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And this is part of why we have to master influence, because
Mhm.
that bullying, it doesn't actually feel like bullying by the person who's doing it. Chances are it's somebody from the business world who has mastered influence, and we have not yet.
Mhm.
They're using social pressure. They're using, the tone of their voice. They're using having multiple people show up and, tell you the exact same thing
Yeah.
to influence you to do something that doesn't necessarily feel correct to you. But my favorite line that comes after the one that you liked
Mhm.
is every addition should result in deletions.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I would love you to read us like an entire stanza or a page. So maybe let's take that page and read these two stanzas because I think this will get a whole picture to our audience.
Oh, this one's a cute one. This one I came up with a long time ago. When we say wireframed, we really mean sketched. To test our assumptions are not so far-fetched. Prototypes are samples, a special sneak peek that open the door to honest critique. And so, like, if you are a product person, you understand that the words here are so thoughtful about agile and lean methodologies that it's not about putting out a sketch of what we're going to build. It's
Yes.
about putting out a sketch to test our assumptions.
Yes.
A prototype is not there to tell you this is what's going to be built. Yes, it is a sneak peek, but it's opening the door to critique. Like, if we're showing it to you, we want you to tell us what you think about it, what's wrong about it, so that when we launch a product into production, we're hoping it causes a market disruption. To know what we'll give the team now, next, and later, check out our roadmaps. And please do us a favor, treat us with kindness and do understand not everything happens as originally planned. Change will happen for many a reason. every addition should result in deletions.
I love that.
Excellent.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, that comes from so many conversations I've had with CPOs
All of us.
and
All of
product
us.
leaders who
Yeah.
talk about how they, like, when they're dealing with a startup CEO, they have like a wall of all the things, and it's like, sure, you can take this new feature and put it in,
Yeah.
but what are you taking out?
Yeah.
Because there's a physical nature of that, and this was my kids book representation of that.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I think Scrum Masters in this case would be able to give this also to other people and tell them, here, read this.
So you
But
just mentioned Scrum. One of the things that there was at some point a line that mentioned Scrum, and I was like, I don't want anything that's overly particular.
yeah.
Lean was like the borderline one, but I decided to keep it in. Like Lean and Agile are the only two terms that are really like that because I think they're more universal and they have more weight per what we discussed earlier. But it's funny to me how even so, like people read the glossary and they're like, I don't like your definition of agile. I don't like your definition of product. And I have lots of thoughts about those people. But I know I'm joking. I appreciate the feedback, but it's so hard to get 7 words that explains product.
Yeah. Amazing. I don't think I have any other questions. What about you, Matt?
I always like to ask authors of books, like, what's the main takeaway that you've gotten in writing the book? What have you learned from the experience?
First of all, children's book authors are amazing. And as mentioned earlier, it's so much harder to get anything sized down to a smaller amount of words than a larger amount of words. I have been reminded that product managers have opinions about everything. But also it's been so long since I've built a product, like from the ground up. It reminded me like how much blood, sweat, and tears is involved in getting anything into production. And especially a physical good, right? I spent my career in technology, but every so often I'd be consulting with a company that also did hardware. And I would have such mad respect for anybody who was doing software and hardware. But this is only hardware. And it reminds me that the product managers who work on things like shampoo and tables and books and doors and fans, like those people do all the things we do, but they only get one shot at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if they screw it up, it's another 9 months before they can get new models and new molds and,
Yeah.
and a new marketing plan. And so
hard.
I think that's one of the big takeaways for me is that we should have a little bit more respect for the physical product managers.
Absolutely. 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 Where
I mean,
can we?
I'm lucky enough that in print nowadays you can do like a first edition and a second edition relatively easily. Like,
Yeah.
but those other things, not so much.
Yeah.
One other line really like in the book is you'll influence those who work on your teams to build real things which started as dreams. So this is something I love about product management. You're involved in creating something with others that has never existed before. And I
Yes.
think that's a part of it. Like something that you just thought of, an idea, becomes reality. And as aspiring PMs, like if you're interested in doing that and solving problems for people with those ideas and dreams, I think the role is like great for you.
Thank you. That's part of the like you could be a PM2 area at the end of the book, which makes me like it's such like a touching part.
Yeah, I like that.
The reason why I use the word dreams there is not because everyone understands like that there's like an idea in your head before it becomes something in reality, but so much of what I talk about when it comes to influence and leadership is that leaders are the people who describe dreams and visions in such a real way that everybody has the same dream.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what alignment means. It means that
Mm-hmm.
everybody is walking around with the same dream, and thus they're able to make decisions on their level to make that dream a reality. And that innovation is about saying the status quo doesn't hold me back. I believe there could be a different future that I can dream about. I can't see it. I can't touch it right now, but I can dream about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to bring other people with me to make it a reality.
Right.
And I was recently at an MLK event a few months back, and there was a preacher who said something that has stuck with me. And if you know Baptist preachers, like they are good at like
Imagery.
oration and leaving you with something that sticks with you. And this particular preacher said, dreamers may die, but dreams never die. And if you think about what we do as product management, I remember Graham Steiner, who was my boss at Pivotal, once said to me, if we do our jobs right, we could walk away for 6 months and the team could build it. Right? And doing your job right means you've communicated a vision, you've transferred a dream to the team, that they know who we're serving, that they know the value someone's going to get out of it, that they know not what it looks and feels like, but what the impact is, what the outcome you're trying to generate is. And then, like, you don't need to be there in every conversation.
Yeah. I think this is the closest explanation to product manager is the CEO of the product that I've ever heard.
So
really,
I have been a CEO, and I wrote an article about why I think product people make great CEOs. And part of that is because we are good at talking about a vision. We are good at influence. The big challenge of that paradigm, which I hate, is
me
that
too.
you're not the CEO yet.
Me too.
Right?
I actually agree. I don't like it, but that's why I said sharing the dream and making the dream follow into the rest of the company. It's probably the one thing that is the same between great product managers and CEOs.
Yeah. I mean, we also do budgeting and resource allocation
Sure.
and all that stuff, but we have to think holistically about things.
Well, you're right.
But that's what makes us good CEOs, right?
Yeah.
And we aren't only concerned with sales. We're actually concerned with sustainability and scalability and ways.
Right.
I mean, we can get into a whole conversation about why I think we make great CEOs, but I think that the paradigm of you're the CEO of a product, yes, this is one of those things that Ben Horowitz was trying to get at.
Right.
Unfortunately, like anything else you put out into the world,
it backfires.
It's going to get bastardized, and I just can't wait to see what happens with this book.
Well, it's actually exciting. I think it's exciting.
Okay, legitimately though, like here's real truth. I had a dozen or so people before I pressed like submit, look through it for explicit material that I didn't see. I was like, is there a boob? Is there a penis? Like, is there an image? Like, I remember being a child with the Little Mermaid, like sea castle on the cover, and that was like a whole thing. And I was like, I need people to look at it with different eyes. Maybe that gets cut out of the podcast. Maybe not. I think that it's important. And no one found anything.
Okay, good. Okay. So you're safe there.
You're
there
safe.
Were lots of commas that were missing, but no one found any of that.
Commas are okay. Commas are good.
We all miss those commas. Amazing. Where can people find the book?
The Lean Product Meetup, which will be happening on May 15th in the San Francisco area. You can come, and everybody who's going to be there's capacity for 190 people, will get to get a book. There's also going to be lots of events around in different places. But if you go to TamiReiss.com, TamiReiss.com, there's a link to join the waitlist, and we will tell you when it becomes available for pre-sale and everything else. And depending on when you listen to this podcast, it may already be available for pre-sale. And so, or for sale. And on TamiReiss.com, there will be a link to do whatever stage the product is at.
Amazing. When is the release date?
So May 15th is his launch date.
Oh, okay. Launch date is the release date. Perfect.
Launch date is the release date. That's the first edition. And then in September, like another 1,000 copies will be available for the Product Development Management Association big conference. And whatever doesn't get sold out of those 1,000 copies will then be on Amazon, and then it'll be on print on demand and all of that stuff.
Amazing.
Excellent.
And where can people reach out to you?
You can go to TamiReiss.com. There's ways to contact me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. The biggest deal about finding me is spelling my name correctly. It's TamiReiss. If you spell it with 2 M's, you're going to find a WNBA coach. That Tami Reiss also has curly hair, but is not me. And those are the most important things.
Yes, perfect. Amazing. We will put the links on the description of the podcast. And we would love to hear from our audience when they read the book. Who are they going
Yes,
to share it
please.
with? Which birthday gift it's going to be, or Christmas list, or Hanukkah list, or whichever list. How many of your colleagues and stakeholders you're going to buy the books for, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's part of why it's coming out like the bigger push in September, because we're actually hoping that it'll be like a holiday gift thing, because it's a really great stocking stuffer or just like a cute gift to give to like your whole
Yeah.
team. And I mentioned earlier that once we produced the YouTube video, the feedback we got meant we should actually print the book. And one of the biggest things we got was people who wanted to buy it for product manager friends who were having a baby, like as a baby gift. That like,
Interesting. That's a
yeah,
cute idea.
because
That's a cute idea.
you're buying them a children's book anyways. It might as well
Yes.
be about product.
Start them early. Start them early.
I don't know. My kids are older. The youngest one is almost 20, and I think they can still benefit from reading this book. So
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Everybody can benefit from reading this book. I mean, there's 6 billion people. Everyone should just read it.
That's it. Tami, it's been a pleasure having you on the show and talking about the book. Moshe, a pleasure as always. Thank you to all the guests, and we'll talk to everybody next time. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.
Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.